So Julian Assange, his extradition hearing, it resumed today at the Old Bailey in London. So this is the central criminal court. And for many reasons, this entire hearing is shady as hell. But traditionally speaking, for those of you who are not English, the Old Bailey is, it's the high court. You go there and you can view the trials. You can actually sit in the gallery and see what's going on. Now, of course, over time, they changed some of the laws. So, if it's a terrorism trial or something that's extremely high profile, they won't let you actually watch it. But nonetheless, for many reasons, this whole thing is being kept behind closed doors. It's a secret trial, and it's like something you'd see out of a totalitarian regime, right? But they brought Julian back, and this morning, they rearrested him. Yeah, you can't make this up. So, if you recall, last month, in August, the U.S., they brought forward this new superseding indictment. It contained no new charges, but it really enlarged the scope of the entire hearing. And I'll get to that in a second. But they brought forward this new superseding indictment. And so, as I pointed out in the last video, regarding lawyers for Assange, even the judge herself was confused because Julian Assange is being held in Belmarsh prison on an old indictment. Why is he being held at all then if the indictment is invalid? Well, he's being held because he's a political prisoner. That's why. And so they brought forward this new indictment and they rearrested him this morning before taking him to the Old Bailey. I mean, you can't make this up. You really can't make this up. They rearrested him. They took him all the way from Belmarsh to the Old Bailey. And, just from the get-go, you have NGOs, human rights organizations like PEN Norway and Amnesty International that are being barred all of a sudden from the hearing. You had like 40 people who had their credentials revoked, their access, remote video access revoked. So you didn't just have journalists locally, but also worldwide who were able to attend the hearing essentially and report on it via remote video access. But 40 people all of a sudden, including Amnesty International, they're not allowed to watch the hearing. No reason provided. The judge just said that, they were given access by mistake. What do you mean by mistake? No, there's no mistake here. They know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to keep this as secret as possible. And this is just another nail in the coffin. So they go and they put Julian behind this glass box, again, as you saw him back in February, this bulletproof box. You have a door on either side, and behind each door is a guard. I mean, they're treating this guy like he's worse than a Nazi. Seriously. And Julian Assange, his father, remarked this. In a second, I'll get to that. And, this is the first time Assange has seen his lawyers in 6 months. So not just because of the pandemic, but they won't give him the basic privileges and necessities that other prisoners in Belmarsh prison are given. I mean, you guys might not recall this, but there used to be a Jordanian preacher called Abu Qattada, and they tried to extradite him for years. And even that guy was placed under house arrest. He was in Belmarsh. They took him out of Belmarsh prison, the same place where Julian is. And this guy is a known terrorist and has connection to the 9/11 hijackers. Okay, just to give you context. And they put him under house arrest. Yet Julian Assange is confined to Belmarsh prison on top of the 7 years he spent in the embassy. And they put him in a bulletproof box and treat him like he's worse than a Nazi or a terrorist. It's ridiculous. It really is. So, he can't study the court materials, and they give him these. They give him the new warrant this morning when they rearrest him, with essentially no time to prepare. So this is the thread that I had going on Twitter when I was reporting live. This picture is from February. It's not from today, but it's essentially the same scenario. He's still stuck in this bulletproof box. And I mean, there's not even enough room for his defense team to get in there. And on top of it, he can't speak to them directly. So his lawyers have to give whatever message or document they have to the guards, and then the guards pass it on to Julian and vice versa. I mean, what is this? It's obscene. Absolutely ridiculous. And as I mentioned, it's the first time he actually sees his team in 6 months. Can you imagine being arrested and then taken to court the same morning and you're given no time to even read the goddamn warrant and prepare a defense, and you can't speak to your lawyers directly? Who on earth is treated like that? Tell me. Never mind a journalist. A journalist, for God's sake. They treat him like he's some mass murderer who has superpowers or something. It's obscene. Could you imagine being arrested and then taken to court immediately? I mean, it's obscene. So here's Julian's father outside the Old Bailey. And as he said, Julian is in the glass box. He finds it difficult to hear anything. In the International Criminal Court, those who've committed heinous crimes are allowed to sit with their lawyers at the bar table. Julian is forced to sit in a glass box with guards at either side. Now, he's right. He's right. I mean, you can go and look at pictures and video from the Nuremberg trials, right? You can go and look at, and those guys committed genocide. And they're sitting in a nicely ventilated room, and, you know, they can do whatever they like. Even those mass murderers were treated better than Assange. You go look at Saddam Hussein, his trial. Also, he's allowed to freely roam. He can do whatever he likes. If you go and watch Once Upon a Time in Iraq, there's a funny story about how he got out of court that day. But essentially what I'm trying to tell you here is that, you know, Julian Assange's father, his point is very well taken. Even people who tried it at the International Criminal Court, even people at the Nuremberg trials, Saddam Hussein, people have committed way worse atrocities than you could possibly attack Julian Assange with, or allege that Julian Assange committed. They've been treated much better, and their hearings have been much more humane, if you could say. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And so I want to show you this clip over here. So this is during the lunch break, or shortly before, and this is this is Kristen Hrnafson, the editor-in-chief from WikiLeaks. Take a look at what he had to say.
Well, I was allowed into a side room on a balcony where I was offered the opportunity to observe journalists watching a video monitor which I couldn't see, and I don't see any benefit in that at all.
So you wasn't able to witness the incident?
No, I was not. I was able to witness journalists working and watching a screen I couldn't see.
And how does it make you feel?
Sorry?
How does it make you feel?
How does it make me feel to be a representative of the organization on trial here alongside Julian Assange and not sitting in a courtroom? I call this an absolute abomination. It's not open justice. As far as I'm concerned, this is a secret trial. This is the kind of trial we are condemning in other countries. It is an absurdity to see this witness here in London.
Thank you.
Well, I was allowed.
He's absolutely right. It is an abomination. And it is a secret trial. It really is, man. You know, they talk about the UK and the US being the vanguards and the beacons of democracy, and the white man who governs based on reason and law and goes around the world colonizing countries and spread democracy and teach them their ways. They don't even have democracy at home. What do you call this? You know, and then they go and put sanctions on other countries and vilify them on the international stage and even bomb and invade them in the name of democracy. And then they treat journalists like this at home. That's what happens, man, when you expose their war crimes. Unbelievable. And so getting to the court arguments now. So there's two main points now when it comes to what the prosecution and defense were arguing. So the first one is about conduct. Now, when we say conduct, what we're referring to is in this new superseding indictment that the Department of Justice issued last month in August, they didn't add any new charges. It's still 18 counts of espionage and cyber crimes. What they did, however, is they added more narrative, so to speak, right? So they can't add any more charges because the 18 counts are already bogus. So what they've done is they've tried to paint Julian Assange as some kind of evil genius criminal mastermind, right? Like, oh, look, he went to this hacker conference like 15 years ago, and he tried to solicit the expertise of all these black hat groups, these hackers like Anonymous and Lulzsec, and they also allege that he hacked into a bank in Iceland, and even Edward Snowden, right? They say that, oh, Julian Assange, he conspired not just with Chelsea Manning, but also with Edward Snowden. He tried to help Edward Snowden escape from Hong Kong, which, as the defense argued, like, is that technically a crime? And what does that have to do with the U.S.? So all of these, all of this nonsense, this spam that they added into the new indictment is for a reason. They're scared. The prosecution is scared that the charges might not be enough to get Julian Assange extradited to the U.S. So they're hoping that by painting him as some mastermind conspirator who worked with all these hacker groups and even went so far as to hack a bank in Iceland and all this nonsense, that is going to carry more weight and enable them to extradite him. And so the defense argued, listen, all of this stuff, it's irrelevant, has nothing to do with Julian. And moreover, half of it is not technically criminal conduct or criminal activity. Okay. The sources are also very dubious. So just to further expand on that, let me show you this. Over here, the indictment fails to disclose that members of the hacking group, Lulzsec, known as Topiary and Kalia, were tried for hacking offenses in Southwark Crown Court a decade ago. So the point is here that Lulzsec, these hackers that allegedly conspired with Julian Assange, already been tried in a UK court. So if Julian Assange really did conspire with them, shouldn't he have been convicted along with them in the original trial back then? Clearly, there was either not enough evidence or he had nothing to do with it. So it's irrelevant to bring this up. That case has already been dealt with. You can't use that as evidence of a crime being committed because he's not involved in it, right? But that's still what the prosecution is trying to allege. They just filled this entire new indictment with nonsense. It's ridiculous. And so they put forward a request. They asked the judge to please throw out, to excise the conduct without further consideration. And then the judge refused. She ruled in the prosecution's favor. So Judge Baratzer, she ruled that she will not throw out or excise the conduct without further consideration. So it's still going to be treated as valid and looked at and contemplated in court. Now, that was a blow. That was definitely a blow because, you got to take into account that this whole superseding indictment was submitted after the deadline. I mean, it's entirely illegal. The whole trial is illegal. It shouldn't be happening at this point. So afterwards, Julian's defense, they asked the judge if they could adjourn the hearing, the extradition hearing, until January 2021, so in four months' time. And the judge left for like 10 minutes or something, and then she came back and she decided no. She said, you had your chance last month to do that, and you didn't, so too bad. And this is so ridiculous. And also the prosecution were complaining that, oh, this request is disingenuous, and it's just because they were denied the motion for the judge to throw out and excise the conduct without further consideration. So now they're just being sore losers, essentially. That's what they were complaining about. It's absurd. Of course they need more time to adjourn. You've just given Julian Assange the warrant this morning. And even before, he didn't have access to the court documents and he couldn't speak with his lawyers personally. Of course he needs more time. The United States had 10 years to prepare this case. Again, the United States had 10 years to prepare this case. And then last month in August, they bring a third indictment after the deadline, completely illegal, and then rearresting Assange in his own jail cell. So that's okay. So, the judge, according to Vanessa Bracer, for her, it's okay for the United States to submit indictments past the deadline and, bring forward a case a decade late and include all this spam. But, if you need more time to prepare defense, you had your chance. Again, it's double standard. She's playing favorites and catering to the Department of Justice in the US and crapping all over Julian Assange and his defense. It's absurd. It really is. So immediately afterwards, the trial continued. And then you had the first witness to testify. It was Professor Mark Feldstein. I'm not sure if I should say it the German way or not, but he's a professor of journalism in the US. And, he's been doing investigative journalism for a few decades now. He graduated from Harvard. And they bring him in to testify as an expert witness in Julian's defense. And man, the technical difficulties, that's an understatement. As I pointed out on Twitter, alongside any semblance of a functioning justice system, the UK is also lacking working court infrastructure. It's an embarrassment. You call this a first world country or a developed country or a democracy? There's no rule of law, and they can't even get a video link working. Are you serious? They're coming here to try this man for cyber crimes. They want to send him to jail for 175 years for cyber crimes, and they can't even get a video link working. Maybe you're not qualified to be dealing with this, just say, that was absurd, man. He gets on, and within the first minute, it cuts out after he lists his credentials. And then you had for 10, 15 minutes, people trying to get the link back up, and then finally it works. And, what he started saying essentially, okay, remember, this guy is a professor of journalism. He's been doing this for decades. And he reasserted to the court what we already know, that what Julian Assange did is protected under the First Amendment. Okay, you don't go after publishers. The defense, they're cross-examining him and they're asking him, well, have you ever seen a publisher be prosecuted like this? Have you ever seen a grand jury indict a publisher? And he said, no, there's a differentiation between source and publisher. Sources have been prosecuted, but never seen a grand jury go after a publisher or a journalist. And he explained also that, whistleblowing, leaking classified information, this is a daily occurrence. And he's seen people at the New York Times and the Washington Post make careers out of this. It happens every day, and it goes back centuries, to the time of George Washington. This is necessary, as he explained, to hold, your government accountable, to hold people in power accountable, to call out abuses of power, corruption, and it's a public service, as he explained. And then once again, the video started cutting out, and then that was it. They decided to adjourn the meeting for the next day. The last thing you heard was, the screen went black. And it was so weird because you had journalists who could see Feldstein, but no one in the courtroom could. It was just complete bollocks. And the last thing, the screen went black, and the last thing you heard was this shit. Oh man, that was so embarrassing. What a disaster. If the entire legal procedure, if the entire persecution of Julian Assange, this witch hunt, was not an abomination in of itself, this is just pathetic. This is just adding insult to injury. Once again, you have to consider that they're doing this behind closed doors. Traditionally, really, this could not be more overstated. I can't overstate this enough. The Old Bailey is known. You come and you watch trials. It's part of English history. On top of that, they're denying him access to his legal team. There's no public viewing, no broadcast. Even among the select few who were given media access, it's revoked at the last minute. Even NGOs who are there as an impartial actor to just observe that everything is going according to some kind of humane standard. Just shady all the way through. I can't overstate this enough. And again, I want to call it playing favorites, but that's such an understatement. It's just, This is making a complete, absolute mockery out of the UK legal system. I mean, this is a US legal system. As I said yesterday, this trial is taking place at the Old Bailey in the city of London, but it's the United States that are holding the gavel, okay? This is not a UK court, and it's complete, absolute extraterritorialization on the part of the US. And it extends far beyond the UK, make no mistake. And we're not saying that, oh, the UK was perfect before. No, far from that. I think it's just the veil has been lifted now for everyone to see if they're paying attention. But yeah, this is an absolute disaster, an absolute mockery of the UK legal system, of any semblance of a fair trial. To call this even remotely fair is lunacy. They're treating this man worse than a war criminal, worse than a Nazi, you know? Seriously, that's not an exaggeration. I just told you before, you had a guy connected to the 9/11 hijackers, Abu Qatada, this Jordanian cleric, who was released on house arrest from Belmarsh prison. But you tell me Julian Assange has to be cooped up and treated like that, but they let a terrorist out for a bit. You know, Abu Qatada, just to give you some background information, Jordan was fighting really hard to extradite him. Okay, so this is not just, somebody who was in Belmarsh. No, he was also fighting extradition. And the UK kept him for ages. I think they arrested him back in 2002, and then he was finally extradited in 2013. But even he was able to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. And again, keep in mind, as I said in the video about lawyers for Assange, you know, this is in violation of several articles under the EU Charter of Human Rights. So Article 3, making sure that someone isn't subject to torture. Article 6, making sure they have a fair trial. The UK is in complete violation of that. And they don't seem to care whatsoever. Yet for this Jordanian terrorist, they took issue enough with it. You know, they kept complaining, we want to get rid of him, but his extradition was blocked successfully for years. They let him out on house arrest. And of course, they even went to such lengths that they even drafted a new extradition treaty between the UK and Jordan to make sure that once he gets there, he won't be tortured and he'll have a fair trial. And guess what? He gets to Jordan free. So you have this terrorist walking around free now in Jordan, but Julian Assange is facing 175 years. You know, talk about a double standard. This is what happens, man. This is what happens when you expose their war crimes, when you really show the empire for what it is. You know, so that's what happened on the first day. And, you know, they're going to continue tomorrow. I think, if I recall correctly, this is going on from September 7th to 24th. And you'll have more witnesses coming to testify. I think regardless what happens, as with Abu Qatada, in his case, back in 2008 and then in 2012, you know, they're going to try and go for appeals, right? So no matter what the judge ends up ruling, the outcome, the result, will most likely be left to the appeals. So we'll see what happens with that. But and another case I'd remind you of. What's his name again? I think it was Gary McKinnon, if I'm not mistaken. I remember watching this old episode of BBC Click Online. They used to cover tech stuff, and this is like 2004 or something. And Gary McKinnon hacked into the Pentagon and NASA and the CIA. Like, they accused him of causing $60 million worth of damages. Again, they had to just invent these ludicrous charges in order to try and extradite him. And his battle went on for years and years and years. And he ended up not getting extradited, actually. Right? But again, his case, I don't think you could argue it's equivalent, because it's not as politicized. It's not as politicized as Julian Assange's. I mean, Julian Assange's hearing, his entire persecution, is 100% political by nature, and it's explicitly outlawed in the extradition treaty between the UK and the US from 2003. So by definition, the whole case should be thrown out. But anyway, I just wanted to bring you up to speed on what happened today, and I'll continue tomorrow on Twitter, and Godspeed to Assange. Pray for him.